Okay, we'll begin. V'nom Adonai Eloheinu aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu kol nena aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu kol neu. Like to begin the shiur tonight for Shaare Orah, on Shaare Orah. First, I dedicate the shiur tonight Leilun Nishmat Harav Aharon Volkan Zichron Tzadik Livracha Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. Also for Leilun Nishmat Tzvi Hirsch Ben Mordechai Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. Also Eliezer Ben Yishayahu David Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. And Shemaya ben Adina Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. Also for David Binyamin ben Dova Fega Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. Hatun Hana bat Mazam Miriam Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. Ruth bat Rachel Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. Meira bat Haim Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. And Zina bat Shura Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. להבדיל בין המתים לחיים, רפואה שלמה, פשבע בן חתון חנה, אלנה רפנה לו, אלנה רפנה לו, אלנה רפנה לו. For Reuven ben Hatun Hana, Elna Rafana lo, Elna Rafana lo, Elna Rafana lo. Also for Marcel bat Fortuna, Elna Rafana la, Elna Rafana la, Elna Rafana la. Also for Shema, for all of the people that are affected by the coronavirus, may they have a speedy and complete recovery. El Narafana Lehem, El Narafana Lehem, El Narafana Lehem, in the Zechut of the Torah we're going to learn tonight. So we're up to page Nun in the book Shaare Orah with the printing that we've been discussing up until now. And we're below the line in Kaf Hey, 25. And over there now it's going to talk about, we mentioned that there were 3 Pesukim in Parashat Beshalach, each one that has 72 letters. And through combining the letters of these 3 Pesukim in a different way, we can come up with a name that has 216 letters, of course 72 times 3. But that being said, it's really 72 triplets. And that's what this is going to talk about over here. But Parashat Beshalach, and Parashat Beshalach, which is Shemot, chapter 14, verse number 18, Yesh Shlosha Pesukim Shebechol Pasuk Ein Bet Otiyot. There are 3 Pesukim, one after another, and each one of these 3 Pesukim, there are exactly 72 letters. Ubechol Pesukim Yahad Resh Yud Vav Otiyot. And when we add up all the letters of the 3 Pesukim together, 72 times 3 is 216 letters. Pasuk Rishon, the first pasuk he says is Vayisa Malach Elokim, which means that when it talks about how God protected the Jewish people when the Egyptians chased after them, it says over there Vayisa Malach Elohim. And then pasuk Sheni, the second pasuk is Vayavo ben Machaneh Mitzrayim, and he came between the encampment of the Jewish people and the Egyptians. And the pasuk Shalishi, the third pasuk right after, Vayet Moshe et Yado, and Moshe lifted up his hand and he smote he hit the ocean and it opened up. Veshem Ayin Bet, and the name Ayin Bet, who Ayin Bet Shemot Hanasot Meresh Yud Vav Otiyot Shel Shloshet HaPesukim Shemithalachot LeShalosh. And the name of 72, this is different than the name of 72 that we know when we take Yud K Vav K, and we make it what's called Maleh Yodin, which means Yud Vav Dalid, Hey Yud, Vav Yud Vav, and Hey Yud. That spells Yud K Vav K, and if you add up all the letters of those, it comes out to 72. That's not the name we're talking about here. This is a different name. This is a name of 72 triplets with 216 letters inside, and that's made from these 3 Pesukim that are broken up and is going to describe how it's done. Ledugma, for example, Ha'ot harishona shel pasuk harishon. The first letter of the first pasuk is a vav. From the pasuk Vayisa, there's a vav. V'ha'ot ha'achrona shel pasuk emtzai halayla. And the last letter of the middle pasuk is a hey. The last letter of the word halayla. V'ha'ot harishona shel pasuk hashlishi. And the first letter of the third pasuk, which is a vav, from the word vayet. Nimsa she'Hashem harishon min ha'ayin bet, and for we see from here that the first one of the names of the 72, meaning it's 72 names. Each one of these 3 letters is a name, and it's a name of 72 names. And the first name comes out to Vav, Hey, Vav. The Vav from the first pasuk, the Hey from the second pasuk, last letter, and the Vav in the beginning of the third pasuk comes out to Vav, Hey, Vav. Ve'achar kach, if you do the same thing with the second letter of the first pasuk, the second to last letter of the second pasuk, and the second letter of the third pasuk, you come up with Yod Lamed Yod. That's another name of 3 letters. V'chen b'chol ha'otiyot al zeh ha'ofan. And if you go continuing on in this pasuk and you continue doing this exact exercise and you go through all the 3 pasukim, you're going to come out to Na'asim Eresh Yud Vav Otiyot Shem Bishloshet HaPasukim Ayin Bet Shemot. And so we see that when you take these 3 pasukim and you do this with this exercise, you end up with a name that has 72 names inside. Now he's going to explain the reason why in the middle pasuk you don't go from the beginning of the pasuk to the end, but you go from the end of the pasuk backwards. What's the reason for that? So he's going to explain that. Why do we begin with the second pasuk? Do we start with the last letter and go backwards forwards? Katav Rabbi Matityahu de la Carte, Rabbi Matityahu de la Carte, Beperusho Sefer Shaare Orah, on his explanation to the book Shaare Orah, Shiba Pasuka Emsaim Matchilim Misofo, the second pasuk, the middle pasuk, we begin from the end. Why? Lefi Sheyesh Bo Din, because in the pasuk is din. What's the din? It says over there, Vekatav Bo Velo Karav Ze Kol Halayla, which means this concept of separation, that there was a separation between the Machaneh of Yisrael and the Machaneh of Mitzrayim. That's a separation. The concept of separation is a concept of din. We discussed that a week or 2 ago when we talked about the Malchut, that the Malchut, what does she do? She has nothing of her own. She's a Kli, which means she only receives. That's the concept of din. And also, what does the Malchut do? It breaks up into smaller pieces and distributes it out amongst the Tachtonim. That's the concept of din, as we see. So because there's a separation between these 2 mahanot, the pasuk is talking about a separation, that is din. That's the same idea that we have. If you look in the beginning of in the creation of the world, there's the first day it says kitov, the third day it says kitov twice. It says Kitov twice, and the second day, Yom Sheni, doesn't have Kitov at all. And if you look at, I think Rashi over there says, what's the reason? Because on the second day, there was a separation between the Mayim of above and the Mayim below to make the Rakia. Anytime there's separation, that is called din. And since there was din there, it was not called tov until the following day, which is Yom HaShlishi, and then it says kitov twice to make up for the kitov that was missing on Monday. So we see that din basically is lo tov. And so therefore, instead of going the forward direction, you go the reverse direction when it comes time for din. This is a very common concept when you look at the different Pesukim and things like that, but that's for discussion for another day. Shayu danim ben Mitzrayim and ben Yisrael, because there was judgment that was happening between the encampment of Egypt and the encampment of the Jewish people. One, the Jewish people were going to be saved by Kriyat Yam Suf, and the other one, the encampment of Egypt, was going to be destroyed by Kriyat Yam Suf. So this concept of din, which is a destruction of Egypt and a salvation of the Jewish people, that caused that separation here. That's why it's din. And we know that generally the Sofit letters are really the remez of the din. The din is the end of the Sofit letters. V'shem Ayin Bet Gematria Chesed, and the name Ayin Bet is Gematria Chesed. If you take Ayin Bet as 72, Chesed, Chet is 8, the Samach is 60, 68, and the 4 for the Dalet is 72 altogether. Hu Hashem HaKolel Kol Chasadav Yitbarach Livro Ulkayem Et Kol HaOlamot. That this name of 72, which means the name of 72 triplets, the name of 72 names that we just describing here, is Kolel Kol Chasadav. It includes all of the chasadim of Hashem, livro ulkayem et kol ha'olamot, to create and to allow all of the worlds to remain in existence. B'kiyum kol ha'olamot, and the continued existence of all of the worlds, bechazdo, in the chesed of Hashem, tzarich gam lemidat hadin betocho, also need din. which this we're going to see this concept very clear. It's going to describe here, and we'll see what's going on in Michigan. It's very, very clear. That he says over here, al derech mashal, to give a parable, ribui hageshem, when there's a lot of rain, bli hagbala, without any border, without any limitations, geshem is considered to be chesed. Water is chesed, but water that has no limit, that becomes without hagbala v'tzimtzum, without a hagbala, without a limitation, without a border, or without a contraction, lefi tzorach hanivraim, according to the need of the ones who are to be receiving, mevim mabul v'churban la'olam. It brings a mabul, it brings a deluge, and it brings destruction to the world. So we understand that water is something that's a bracha. When a person has water, it's a bracha. But too much water, like what we see going on in Michigan with all the flooding that's going on with those dams that collapsed because of the river that swelled so much because of the water, look at the destruction that it happens. We saw that with Sandy, obviously, a couple of years ago, in different times, Indonesia in 2003. So we understand that a ribui of something that is good without any proper limitation potentially can also be bad. And that's the concept of the middle pasuk, which is the din, to put a limitation on the chesed, so therefore it's not chesed to a level that it's going to cause destruction. We see the same concept of Avraham Avinu. Avraham was called Ish HaChesed. He was the man of loving kindness. Loving kindness to the extent that he wanted to keep Yishmael in the house, despite the fact that he was potentially going to be a bad influence on Yitzchak. And Sarah in that situation was the din, and she's the one who said to her husband, Garesh et hamazot et penah, send out this boy and mother. Why? Because he's a bad influence. So this concept of Avraham, who had this unlimited chesed, had to be properly governed by Sarah. So we see this concept throughout. So chesed unlimited is potentially also problematic. It has to be given according to the need of the creatures underneath. And that's why the second pasuk is din. Okay, let's go now to the top of the line on page Nun. That's where we are right now. The im ken nimtza shem aleph daled nun yud beotiotav morot al memshalto ve'inyano. So therefore we see that the name aleph daled nun yud, which we said is a remez, is basically the sphere of the malchut, in its letters hints to the memshalah, to the government, and how the malchut governs the lower worlds. How does this work? V'inyano, ketzad. How does this work? Aleph shebo, the aleph of aleph daled nun yud, husod eheyeh shehu lamala. This is the secret of eheyeh, which means it's the aleph of aleph daled nun yud is from the name eheyeh, which is the keter, which is way up. Yud Shabo, the Yud of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, that we had the last letter of Adonay, Hu Sod Havaya Shehu Shochen Bo. This is a remez to the Yud Ke Vav Ke that is Shochen, that is Shochen, which means the Shekhinah provides, like we said, the Shekhinah, the Malchut provides a place for the Yud Ke Vav Ke to dwell. Continuing on, now, so we explain the Aleph of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, and we explain the Yud of Aleph Daled Nun Yud. What's in the middle? Daled Nun, which is Din. Daled Nun, Husod Nun Daled Shemot Havayot. This is what we described last week from the Sefer Yetzirah. We brought that. The 54 different ways you can combine the letters of Yud Ke Vav Ke. Shehem Sod Kol Minei Shefa V'Atzilut V'Kiyum Kol HaNivraim Shebaolam. And that is the secret of all of the abundance and the existence of all of the creatures that exist in the world. Once again, the concept of a limitation of the chesed, that's the concept of din, which allows there to be the appropriate abundance and shefa so that the lower creatures can survive. This is the concept of the tzimtzum that we talked about before. Anyway, nimtzet lamed, therefore we learn, ki kol ha-memshala va-shaltanut hu biyad Adonay, that all of the memshala, all of the government of the lower worlds, and the shilton and the ruling over the lower worlds is by the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Ulfichach hu morel lashon adnut, and therefore that's why the name implies adnut, which is master. Shezeh Hashem hu Adon kol haaretz. This name is Adon kol haaretz, the master of everything. Bekoach havaya hashochen bo, through the strength, through the power of Yud Kei Vav Kei that dwells in Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Also remez to the Daled Nun, which is the Yud Kei Vav Kei that's dwelling in Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Okay, that's what he just discussed here. Let's go to the bottom over here, Kaf Vav, underneath the line. Adonay beotiotav morot al memshalto. That Aleph Daled Nun Yud in its letters is showing you the memshalah, showing you the ruling, showing you the government. Sfirat HaMalchut, the sphere of the Malchut, mekabelet mikol hakochot shemalea, receives from all of the forces that are above her. Vehi manhiga et haolam, and she rules over the world. Obviously, the force from above, but the bottom line is that through her is the ruling of the world. Those forces, though the powers from above, are transmitted through the Malchut, and that's how it's divided up in the world. V'lachen nikret Adonay milshon Adon, and therefore we see the word Aleph Daled Nun Yud is from the language of Adnut. Incidentally, if you look at the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Hey, it talks about the kavanah a person's supposed to have. We discussed this a couple of weeks ago in the Gemara Shiur when we discussed the Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, the kavanah a person's supposed to have when he says that pasuk, or when a person says Aleph Daled Nun Yud, when he says Yud Kei Vav Kei with Aleph Daled Nun Yud, when he says Baruch Atah Amunai, one of the kavanot a person's supposed to have is Aleph Daled Nun Yud is Adon HaKol, which is what he's discussing here. Ava b'shem zeh remuzim kol hakochot sheme'irim betocha. And in the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud is a remez to all of the forces that are shining in her. What are they? The Aleph Hey Yud Hey, the Ehyeh, which is the Keter, and the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the Tiferet, which is Me'irim, which are shining or revealed through the Malchut, as we discussed from prophecy. Ha'echad b'tchilat shosho mishem Ehyeh, one, which is at the beginning of the root, which is the Aleph Hey Yud Hey, which is the Keter, which is the name Aleph Hey Yud Hey. Hayud shebesofo, the yud at the end of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, who miyud shel shem havaya, is from the yud, from the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Continuing on, the Nun Daled, and the other two letters of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, the Nun and the Daled, be'emtza minun Daled tzirufei shem havaya, is a reference to the 54 different tzirufim of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei that we discussed last week. Hamramzim al midat hadin shebetocham, which hint to the midat hadin that is within them. Continuing on, Aleph Daled Nun Yud otiyot Adin. If you take the letter Aleph Daled Nun Yud and you have changed them around a little bit, it becomes Aleph Din. Okay? K'moshe katav Rabbeinu Bachye, like Rabbeinu Bachye wrote in Shmot chapter 4, verse number 28, the Gila lo kishem Aleph Daled yotzeh mehem Aleph min Ehyeh, the Yud min Yud Kei Vav Kei basof, umidat hadin ba'emsa kishmi b'kirbo. So we see that the Rabbeinu Bachye in Shmot chapter 4 is basically saying exactly what is being said by the Shaare Orah. Rabbeinu Bachye was a rabbi who lived in the Middle Ages, I think in the 1200s or 1300s. So this is easy. Obviously, was also a Kabbalist as well, and we see that's contained within his Perush on the Torah. V'atam lemidat hadin ki hamalchut hanhagata lehamid et hakol lefi midat malchuto yitbarach b'din gamur. And what is the reason that Aleph Daled Nun Yud denotes din, judgment? What's the reason for that? Because the malchut, the way she rules, the way she governs, is lehamid et hakol, to give everything existence according to the midah, according to the measure of the malchut, Yitbarach bedin gamur, with a complete judgment. One second, so I'll answer your question. V'tzricha shleshituf midat harachamim, and what is needed is adding on to that midat harachamim, uleorah chesed shebelize hayta cherev nokemet nekam brit. And what's needed in order to have the proper midah, the proper amount, is to add the rachamim into that as well, which of course is the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Why? Because by adding the rachamim inside the Yud Kei Vav Kei, what that does, without that, she would be what's called cherev nokemet nekam brit, the sword that avenges the vengeance of the covenant. וגם המלכות נותנת לכל הנבראים במדויק לפי החלק המגיע להם לגילוי מלכותו יתברך. And also the malchut gives to all of the creatures exactly according to the portion that is appropriate for them, according to the revelation of Malchuto, according to the revelation of the Malchut Yitbarach. Yesh ba'koach hatzimtzum v'hester kedei shichlu hanivraim lasig ulkabel et haorot ha'alyonim. And within the Malchut, there is the koach of the tzimtzum, which basically means the idea to filter or to contract, v'hester, and to hide, kedei shichlu hanivraim, so that therefore the creatures can perceive and receive the orot elyonim, the orot, the upper lights or the emanations. And what comes from the beginning, which is the aleph from the keter, the aleph hey yud hey, to give hint that even though the malchut is manhiget olam, is running the world, behester, in a hidden way, kon hanhagata gam al pi hanagat eyeh. But we said the malchut on herself has nothing on her own. Everything she's receiving is receiving from above, and the makor and the source of everything is the keter, is the aleph hey yud hey. Shehi hanhagat hayichud, which is the concept of the yichud, hanhagat yichud. That is the aleph hey yud hey. Lehovil et kol habriya lidei tikuna ve'achol tova, to bring the entire creation according to its rectification, everything according to the good, letova. Ulatid lavo, he's going to say, and I answer your question, Yitgaleh shekol sivuvei hanhaga b'chol sheshet alfei shana. And from here, we're going to see from here, in the future, there's going to be revealed that all of the government, all of the things that we saw throughout all of history, in the 6,000 years of the existence of the world, hayule tova, everything was for tova, legilui malchuto v'yichudo, for the purposes of revealing his kingship and his oneness. And that's why the name Aleph Hey Yud Hey represents the Yichud. And that we're going to, like we said from Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was at Har Sinai, and he asked, what name are they going to be rescued? What was the name? Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. The first Eheyeh was for Geulat Mitzrayim, and the second Eheyeh is going to be for the Galut, the Geulah from America, which is going to time of the Mashiach and Tchiat HaMetim. And that would be the revelation of the Yichud, which is Aleph Hey Yud Hey in the world. Right now, it's the revelation of Yud Kei Vav Kei through Aleph Daled Nun Yud. And the Yud Kei Vav Kei is Mishpat, is basically appropriate judgment, which gives a Bechira. But when there's the Gilui of the Aleph Hey Yud Hey, which is the time of the Tchiat HaMetim, then there's no more Bechira, and there's no more death, and there's no more Yetzer Hara. All right, continuing on. All right, so we're just finished Kaf Vav. Let's look at Kaf Zayin, 27, which is below the line. It says over here, Adon Kol Haaretz. This is what we said, that Aleph Daled Nun Yud represents Adon Kol Haaretz, which was one of the kavanot. It's the kavanah for Aleph Daled Nun Yud, and it's also the kavanah for Yud Kei Vav Kei when it's read as Aleph Daled Nun Yud. So continuing on, it says here, Shem Adnut Moreh Al Shilton Memshala. The name Adnut basically shows us Shilton, Sholet, ruling, Memshala, government, okay? And this is the whole concept of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim, the Adnut, the Adon al Kol Haaretz. This is the whole concept of Shilton Lefanecha, as we say on the holidays. Many of the kavanot of the holidays is the Tikkun HaShekhinah, the Tikkun of the Malchut. Continuing on, Ve'en Shem HaAdon Ra'ui El Mi Sheyesh Lo Avadim. And the name Adonai, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, is only really appropriate for a person that has servants, right? Adon HaKol. The name Adon HaKol, what does that mean? means master. Master of what? There has to be servants. Otherwise, God forbid, it's like damaging to the master. So this is the whole idea that when a Jew is mikabel ol malchut shamayim, receives the yoke of heaven, he is making a correction or a rectification to the aleph daled nun yud, the Shekhinah. Why? Because when a Jew is accepting upon themselves that he's an Eved Hashem, a servant of God, which means he puts his will aside to do the will that God is asking him to do. What is he doing? He's rectifying the Shekhinah. He's increasing the Malchut. He's increasing the Adnut of Hashem in the world. Now, that doesn't mean God is not the master even before the world was created. Of course he was. But the idea is this is what we do. And this is the concept we're going to read in a couple of parashot from now. Maybe we'll talk about it in the parashah class. When Moshe Rabbeinu, what does he say? Ve'ata yigdal na koach Adonay. Right? Now let the strength of Hashem be increased. Well, what does it mean, the strength of Hashem? How can that be? The strength of God can't be increased. He's omnipotent. There's nothing we can add. Well, that's correct. But what we can add is to how he is revealed in the world. And that is the role of a Jew. Through the performance of mitzvot, ma'asim tovim, and limud Torah, we are revealing God in the world. And basically declaring him the Adon. And that's the whole concept of Tikkun HaShekhinah in a very, very short way. This is what Rabbeinu Bachye said in Vayikra on chapter 6, verse number 3. V'anu omrim b'piyut, and we say in a certain piyut, in a certain poem, Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra. Adon olam, which basically means master of the universe. Asher Malach, which he was king even before the universe. Beterem kol yetzir nivra. Even before everything was created, he was still Adon Olam Asher Malach, and he was the Melech, yes? Shegam lifnei shayu bru'im, even before there were created beings, Malachim and human beings, Haya Adon umelech bekocho habilti bal tachlit. He was a master, and he was a king in his infinite power, without any limit, without any tachlit, without any limitation. Omnam, but, and then continuing on in Adon Olam, which Adon Olam is a very, very deep piyut, by the way. Le'et na'asa b'heftzo kol azay melech shemo nikra. Le'et nasa, when things were made, na'asa, the concept of asiyom asot Hashem Elohim eretz v'shamayim, asa, b'cheftzo kol, in his desire, azay melech shemo nikra. What's the purpose? What was the purpose of the world? So that we would call him melech. That is the purpose of the creation of the world. So the creatures of the world could reach out to God and call him king. Not that he's not a king, even if we don't call him king, chas v'shalom, but the purpose of our being is to declare him the king. That's what it says, continuing on. Shebishah shebara ulamo, in the time that when God created the world, lehan'iget briotav, to govern and to rule over his creatures, as then Shemo Nikra, his name was called. Befi briotav melech ve'adon, by in the mouth of his created beings, melech and adon. And that's why learning of the Torah, what is it called? Or reading the Torah, it's called Kishem Adonai Ekra. It's called Ekra, which means when we are learning Torah, whether we're reading Torah Shebechtav or we're learning Torah Sheba'al Peh, we are calling the name of God. We are revealing God in the world. And that's why the greatness of Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that's why Talmud Torah is so big. Bezeh hayta matarat habriyah. And this was the purpose of the creation. If you look at the Etz HaChaim, this is what he says. The Etz HaChaim, in the beginning of the Etz HaChaim of Rav Chaim Vital, in the name of the Ari, this is what he says was the purpose of the creation was exactly what we're reading now. The Ramchal went a little further and said something a little deeper. We'll talk about that another time. K'moshe katav Etz HaChaim, as it's written in the Etz HaChaim over here, Sha'ar Aleph Anaf Bet, in the first gate and the second branch, Ukshala Birtsono, when it was risen in his ratzon. When you hear ratzon, what do you think? Keter. Kisha'ala birtsono leha'atzil ne'etzalim, to emanate emanations, v'livro hanivraim l'siba nodat, and to create the creations according to a specific reason. Now look at the lashon there, very, very meduyak. Lehatzil ne'etzalim, that is basically the atzilut, right? Not that was created, the atzilut was always there. The only difference is through the tzimtzum, it was revealed, because by having a limitation that allowed the future creatures that were going to be made to be able to appreciate it. And then he talks about velivro hanivraim, and to create the created beings, which is the three worlds that we discussed. The Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, which is called Olam HaPirud, the world of separation. And the purpose of this is so that he shall be called Rachum v'Chanun v'Kiyotze. When we call out God's behavior of Rachum, what are we doing? We are revealing God in the world. When we call out God's behavior of Chanun, what are we doing? We are revealing God's behavior in the world. We are fulfilling our function. And if there's no one in the world that can receive the mercy from him, how can he be called Rachum? It doesn't mean he's not merciful. Of course, his essence is still merciful. But he can't be called merciful if there's no creatures to appreciate his mercy. V'chen b'shem Adnut, and the same thing is the name Adnut. Im lo hayu nivraim lo haya yachol likare Adon. And the same thing for Adnut. If it wasn't for the fact that there were creations, there would be no one to call him Adon. He would still be a master of the universe, no question about it, but there would be no one to call him. So the entire purpose of our creation is lehikar, so that we will call God by his attributes, which is another way of saying learning the Torah, like we discussed, because the Torah is all the names and the midot of Hashem and the kinuyim. Every word in the Torah is a name or a kinui or a shem of Hashem, yes? And therefore, by reading those words, we are revealing, we're doing exactly our purpose. And that's why Talmud Torah gets keneged kulam. Ubisfirat HaMalchut, in the sphere of the Malchut, Hamhanigat HaOlam, that governs the world, Mitgalet Malchuto ve'Adnuto. And through the sphere of the Malchut is how his Malchut and his Adnut and his mastership, his kingship and his mastership is revealed in the world. And that's why he's called Adonai, Adon Kol Haaretz, master of all of the worth of the land, of the world. Now I just want to focus, he said something here, I just want to just expand on this just a little bit. There are two concepts that are brought in the Mishnah in Masechet Chagiga. One is something called Ma'aseh Merkava, and the other one is called Ma'aseh Breshit. What is the difference between Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Breshit? If you remember, the Mishnah over there says that you can only teach Ma'aseh Breshit to someone who is two people, not more than two people. And regarding Ma'aseh Merkava, you can only teach to one person. And what it says about Ma'aseh Breshit, it has to be someone who's mevin davar mitoch davar, understands something from something else. What is that? What's the deeper meaning over there? So what is Ma'aseh Breshit? That is everything that was created from the world of Bria and Yetzirah and Asiyah. All of the worlds that were created after the Atzilut, because remember we said Atzilut is not created, that always existed, and we'll talk about what Ma'aseh Merkava is. So Olam HaBri, the creation, which is Ma'aseh Breshit, is all of the creation of the worlds, which is the creation of the world of Bria, the world of Yetzirah, and the world of Asiyah. That is Ma'aseh Breshit. So what is Ma'aseh Merkava? Ma'aseh Merkava is the revealing of the world of Atzilut, which means the ability given for the lower worlds, for the lower beings, human beings, specifically Jewish people, to appreciate the to appreciate God's function in the world. That is Atzilut. So the entire concept of the Tzimtzum and the Kav, this is all Maaseh Merkava. From the Bria, from the creation, that is considered to be Maaseh Breshit. And if you think about the Torah in the first pasuk, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. What's the beginning that's discussed there? Maaseh Breshit. Maaseh Merkava is not discussed there. Certainly not openly. It's hinted to, but it's not openly discussed. Maaseh Merkava is before the bet. Any questions on what I just said? Okay. Let's continue on. So go above the lines, and we're in the second paragraph above the lines. Ulefi she'en lechol nivra ba'olam derech likanes l'Hashem yitbarach ela al yado. And that's now Rabbi Gikatilia talking. And now, since we know that there is no way for any created being in the world to go, to enter to the holy name, to blessed name, except by the way of the Aleph Daled Nun Yud, v'kol she'ela v'tachanonim ubakasha enam nichnasim ela ayidei Adonai, and any request or any tachanun. Tachanun is asking for something and basically because you don't deserve it. Bakasha is also a request. All of these three things do not enter in except by way of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, which is through the Malchut, through the Shekhinah. Hutzrechu likboa berosh kol hatfilot. And that's why in the beginning of every tefillah, of course, tefillah is Shmona Esrei. Everything else is either preparation or afterwards. But when we say tefillah, we are talking about 18 brachot of Shmona Esrei. And every one of the tefillot begins with a pasuk. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. It starts with that pasuk. Why? That's what he's saying now. Ki pasuk ze katuv. Because in that pasuk, what's written? Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Written out, which Aleph Daled Nun Yud is the name that's there. It's not Yud Kei Vav Kei in red as Aleph Daled Nun Yud. It's Aleph Daled Nun Yud Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Vezehu Aikar. And this is the essential element. Ve'ayidei Shem Zeh. And through that name, Nichnasot HaTefilot Lifnei Hashem Yitbarach. All of the tefillot are able to go before Hashem. And that's why that pasuk is there. Let's look at Kafchet below the lines. Nichnasim ele al yedei amonai. That everything goes through the Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Surata tefillah hi she'adam ya'amid et atzmo ki'ani v'rash. Basically, what is the way a person's supposed to be praying? How is a person supposed to be praying before God? He should consider himself ani. Ani is poor. Rash. Basically another type of poverty, completely impoverished. Why? Because remember, the Malchut has nothing of her own. She is empty, except for what she receives from above, and what she receives from below. So the way a person can approach the Malchut is through recognizing that you are nothing. And he should think to himself that he doesn't have anything of himself at all. This is the deeper meaning of what it means you have to go through the Malchut, which means the Midah of Malchut is what's required in order for the prayers to penetrate. Meaning what? The fact that you are nothing. And that's one of the reasons why, certainly for Shachrit and Arbit, the rabbis established that we say Kriyat Shema right before. Because one of the things of Kriyat Shema is what? The concept of bitul. Which means a person has to love God with all of his heart and with all of his soul and with all of his money. Which basically means have to love God completely and has nothing of his own. Everything is from him. Appreciating that for yourself is how a person is able to have his tefillot penetrate. Vehu mevakesh mehaboreh, and he's asking from the Boreh Yitbarach, from the Creator. Bechol yom de machsoro. He's asking for what's called de machsoro. Basically, what does de machsoro mean? That is what he is missing. Okay? Not asking for anything more than he's missing. De machzoro. There's a concept of this in halakha regarding an ani, that we are obligated to provide for a poor person what's called de machzoro, what they are missing. So a person who's never been wealthy, you provide them for 15 seudot in a span of a week, because each day is 2 seudot, and then Shabbat there's 3, so 6 times 2 is 12, and then the 3 on Shabbat is 15. That's 15 seudot. So that is what one has to provide in ani as far as charity is concerned, what's called de machzoro. But what if the person's ashir? If the person's ashir, then you have to give him whatever he's missing. The idea there is his kli, his utensil is bigger because he's accustomed to more. And therefore, we have to provide him whatever he's missing. De machzoro. And that's why when a person is approaching Hashem, the way to approach Hashem is de machzoro. I am nothing. That means I have nothing on my own. And I only need the minimum. This is how we approach. Okay? Bracha, of course, is what? Bracha ad bili dai. So instead of the word de machzoro, dalid yud, de machzoro, it comes bracha ad bili dai, without any limitation, which is an incredible amount of bracha. This is a change of the word from de to dai, but that has to do with how a person is approaching the prayer. And that's the concept of Moshe Rabbeinu when it says vayet hanan el Adonai ba'et lemor. What does it mean vayet hanan? Zok the Rashi. He asked for matanat chinam. He was asking to go into the land of Israel, and despite all of that he had done in 80 years of his prophetic career, what is he asking? He's asking Hashem for what's called matanat chinam, which means I'm nothing. I don't deserve anything. Just give it to me for free. Continuing on. Which means the amount that he's missing, that's what a person's supposed to be asking for, which is the minimum amount that is needed for sustenance. And that's why it says, Tzadik ochel lesova nafsho. A tzaddik eats not just physically, but also eats according to the desire, the sova, the sustenance of his soul. A person who's not a tzaddik eats according to the sustenance of his body. That's not the same. There is no limit to what the body needs to be sustained. It's unlimited. But in the nefesh, that's the way the person's supposed to consume what is needed by the nefesh. And the most important food the nefesh needs is not food. It needs Torah. This is the concept of that the person can be nourished through the ear. How is this possible? I'm a doctor. There's no way the person can get nourished through the ear. That's the concept of hearing the Torah. When a person's learning Torah, speaking Torah, and it goes into the ear, that is what's giving nourishment to the soul. Continuing on. So de machzor sheyechsar lo. That's what it says. That's what you have to provide the ani. And when a person's approaching Hashem, he's supposed to be like ani. So therefore, Hashem will give him de machzora sheyechsar lo, whatever he's missing. Continuing on, ked'ita b'Shulchan Aruch, like it's explained in the Shulchan Aruch, an Orah Chaim, Siman Tzadi Het, which is talking about the laws of tefillah. Yitpalel derech tacharonim kirash hamevakesh b'petach. Person's approach to the prayer, the gisha to the prayer should be tachanunim. What is tachanunim? Matanat hinam. I don't deserve anything. I'm nobody. I'm zero. Matanat hinam. Just give me. I'm a rash. A person's a poor person. Hamvakesh b'petach. Begging at the petach. Asking for what they need. Not what they want, but what they need. V'chen hanhagat sfirat hamalchut, and therefore we see that the sfirat of malchut let la megarma klum. She has nothing of her own. Everything that malchut has, it's what she receives from above. That's called itaruta dila'ela, or what she receives from below, itaruta dilatata. And this is the concept of Tnu Oz Lelohim, but we'll leave that alone. Rak omedet lekabel hashefa me'asfirot she'alea vehi dala va'aniya. And what is the purpose of the Malchut? Her purpose is only to receive shefa, abundance, from the sfirot that are above her. And she is dala, she is empty, and aniya, and poor. This is how we have to approach Hashem. And this is what the Aleph Daled Nun Yud of the Pasuk Adonay Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Agiti Latecha is supposed to remind you when you're beginning to start your Shmona Esrei Tefillah. Velachen behanhaga zo naaseh Adam davuk b'sfirat hamalchut. When a person thinks like that the way the Shulchan Aruch is telling how a person's supposed to approach the prayer, that it's derech tachanonim, asking for a free gift, basically like a poor person asking at the petach. He did nothing to deserve anything, he's just begging, yes? When a person approaches the tefillah in this way, what is he doing? He's attaching himself to the sfirah of the malchut, because that's her character trait. Shehi hashar shedarcha nichnasim kol tefillot, and that is the shar through which all of the prayers enter. K'd'ita b'zohar, like it's explained in the Zohar in Breshit. Ubegin da tzarich barnash lemehave ihu ke'ani letar'a demalka b'tzlota. And therefore, it says here in the Zohar, a person has to be as if he's a poor person at the gate of the king in his prayer. That's what the Zohar says. Ki evyon legabe tar'a deihu Adonay. And the Zohar continues on and says, evyon, like a poor person, legabe tar'a, like in front of the gate, deihu Aleph Daled Nun Yud. And that's what the Zohar says. Ve'habi'ur, and the explanation. Sheshem Aleph Daled Nun Yud, Hamoreh Amidat HaMalchut, that basically describes the midah of the Malchut. Milu'o, the milu'o, when you take Aleph Daled Nun Yud and you spread it out, which means the Aleph is Aleph Lamed Pei, the Daled is Daled Lamed Taf, the Nun is Nun Vav Nun, and the Yod is Yod Vav Daled. Just like we do with Yud Kei Vav Kei, we could do the same thing with Aleph Daled Nun Yud. And if you take the milu'o of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, it comes out to the gematria Tar'a Taf Resh Ayin Aleph, which means 671. You can't make this up. Tar'a in Aramaic is a sha'ar. So we see that why, first of all, how Aramaic also has with it the Lashon HaKodesh. Now we begin to understand why the Zohar is written in the language of Aramaic. Unlike the Gemara was written in Aramaic so the common people would understand, the writing of the Zohar in Aramaic was not for the common people to understand, because common people are not learning the Zohar. So we see that through the Aramaic there are sodot. So when you take Aleph Daled Nun Yud and you spread it out, open it up, it comes out to Tar'a, which in Aramaic is Shar, and that's exactly what the Zohar is talking about. Targum shel sha'ar, that's the Aramaic translation of the word sha'ar. The remez, and the hint, midat ha-malchut, the attribute of the malchut, hi hashar harishon, she is the first gate, lihikanes le'olam ha'atzilut, to enter into the world of the atzilut, lefi shehi omedet besof olam, because she is standing, she is placed at the end of the Atzilut. She's the lowest of the Sfirot of the Atzilut. V'darka olim kol atfilot ad elav yitbarach. And through the Malchut, all of the prayers go up to him, to Yitbarach, to Hashem. Ve'achar kach, and afterwards, mekabelat et kol hashefa, and then afterwards, when the prayers go up, what happens? It draws down abundance from the Ein Sof, through the Keter and the Sfirot, to the Malchut, sheyesh ba mehmidot she'alea, and what she receives from above, ke'inyan ha'mitpalel shenichnas b'shar HaMelech, like the person who's praying at the gate of the king. Omed lifnei HaMelech u'mvakesh lekabel ha'shefa mimenu, and he's asking to receive the shefa. But the only way a person can have their prayers enter is by having the midah of the Malchut, which is basically aniyah v'dala, poor and empty, which means I am nothing, like a rash, like an ani. This is how a person approaches the prayer, and this is what allows the prayers to enter through the Malchut, to go up and then draw down shefa, so the Malchut receives, and when the Malchut receives, then you receive. This is another concept which the Gemara talks to as well. It's the sod behind the concept of, it says in the Gemara, if you need something and your friend needs something, the Gemara says, what do? You pray for your friend to get it. Because if you pray for your friend to get it, what happens? The Gemara says you're answered first, which means you will receive it first. You don't have to pray for yourself. You pray for your friend to get it, and what'll happen is it's going to be that you're going to get it first. How do we understand this? The Malchut is Aniyah Vidala. She is poor and she is empty. And especially now when the Shekhinah is in the Galut with us, because we are in the exile. And that's why the whole idea of the Ramchal is what we should be doing is praying that the Malchut should receive Shefa. We're not praying for us. But what's going to happen? Malchut receives Shefa, and what does she do? A good woman takes what she receives and then gives it over to others in a better way. So whatever she receives, she's going to give over. But we don't have to pray for ourselves. We can pray that the Malchut should be restored, should restore the glory of the Malchut when she's connected with the king. And when the Malchut is full, then she will give over to us. This is the whole concept of praying for the Shekhinah to return to her husband, praying for the Shekhinah to return to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is there's a Bet Mikdash Mala and there's Bet Mikdash Mata, and it says that God is in His he's always waiting and eagerly awaiting for that. This is the secret of the prayer, that we shouldn't be so concerned about ourselves, since basically, this is not a friend even. This is the Gemara is talking about a friend. This is talking about the Melech. We're talking about the King of all kings, the Master of the universe. When the Jewish people are in the exile, aside from the fact that we're embarrassed, yes we are, but the King is embarrassed. You have 2.7 billion Christians and Muslims that think that they're right, and the King is patient with all this. We should be praying for the restoration of the Shekhinah. We, of course, will receive all the benefits from that, but that is not the goal of the prayer. The goal of the prayer is to restore the glory of the Shekhinah, and through that we will restore the glory of the Jewish people. Any questions?
Sorry, the question was with the Torah. How did you get to Torah?
Okay, so you take the word Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, okay? And you take Aleph, the first letter of the word Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud. How is it spelled? Aleph, Lamed, Pei. Add that up. Comes out to 111, if my math is correct. Hold that number. The next one is a Dalet. How do you spell Dalet? Daled, Lamed, Taf. That's 434. Add that to the other number. What do we get? Aleph Lamed Pei is 111. 111 and 434 is 545. Okay? Nun. How is Nun spelt? Nun Vav Nun. That's 106. Add 106 to that. 651. Right? And then Yod. Yud Vav Daled. That's 20. 671. What's Tar'ah? Taf, Resh. Taf is 400, Resh is 200, that's 600. Ayin is 70, and Aleph is 1, 671. Isn't that amazing? This is the Sod. How could you make that up? First of all, who could think that? Who could figure that out? It's not like a Tosafot or a Gemara that if you beat your head enough about it, you can find it, right? This is not. This is what we call revelation. This is Gilui. This is not just a person just thinks about this and says, oh my God, no. This is huge. And how does it fit? And it's contained within a couple of words of the Zohar. This is the Sod. And that's why it's a Sod. It's a secret. A secret can only be revealed to you, which means it has to be given to you. You're not going to get it on your own. And that's why we see the great rabbis of the Kabbalah, when they reached the levels that they needed to reach, they had a Magid, they had an angel that would come to them and teach them things, because they needed to have revealed the secrets, because this is not something one can figure out on their own. And if you could do it once, can you do it every time? No way. You get lucky once in a blue moon, maybe you'll come up with something. But this is how the Sod works. Okay, I think this is a good place to stop. Baruch Adonay le'olam amen ve'amen. Have a good day, everybody. We'll see you Bezrat Hashem on Wednesday.